Well, the most important person is on. It's Andy Kang, so we can go.
Andy, while we're doing this, I'll make you the presenter so we can see your screen here.
So, well, good afternoon, everyone. I'm Omega Hartman. I'm with the Pro Bono Advisory Committee, and I'm here to welcome all of you to our first quarterly conference call for Pro Bono directors. We have a number of programs set up for this year for these quarterly conference calls. The first one is dealing with domestic violence population, but I think it has applicability for all different kinds of populations, as Andy will discuss during the presentation, so that if you have not started with a nonprofit in your area, you can get some very good ideas from Andy on how to go about it. Andy Kang has an impressive resume within the Financial Planning Association as a financial planner, but also in the pro bono area. She was one of the leading people when the organization started pro bono in 2001, 2002. And she was one of the early planners to work with domestic violence populations in her area. And she, along with the New York chapter, have worked on presentations for this group, and she will be sharing that with us today. And Noreen from Coughlin from the foundation will be putting that up on the website for you so you can refer to it as you need it later on. So just a couple of things before we start the program with Andy, and that is I wanted to mention two things that we've started for directors. I've posted some things on FPA Connect on our community website about mentoring. We've had some mild response to that, but I wanted to point that out again on this call. In case you would like one-to-one mentoring from an experienced planner in pro bono, you can respond to that post on FPA Connect, and we will connect you with a planner who can work with you and your chapter to either start or expand the pro bono that you have in your area. The second thing I wanted to mention is that we've started a new community for anyone interested in pro bono, not just directors, and people that are working with pro bono populations now, those that might be interested in doing something in pro bono, as well as experienced planners who have been very active in the past with pro bono. So we're going to make that a very active community, and I hope that you'll go, after this call, you will all join that community so that there'll be more sharing of ideas from all different groups and planners. And the final item I wanted to mention is regarding the FPA BE conference in Seattle. We've posted on FPA Connect as well. There is a session on philanthropy that I would like everyone to look at and hopefully vote for, since we have crowdsourcing this year as to what members want at the conference. But it's an interesting conference in that it brings together some of the areas of interest as pro bono leaders, as well as financial planners in our own practices. So I would like everyone to take a look at that. And with those three items out of the way, I would like to really welcome Andy Kang to this call and to thank her for all that work she has done in pro bono. So I give the screen to Andy, and thank you for coming, Andy.
Thank you very much. Is the screen up? I don't see it on my screen, or should I just use this?
Go ahead with that, Andy. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay. This is a PowerPoint presentation that was given in 2006, so I want you to know that it's fairly dated, but the information is pretty relevant. And I feel very, very strongly that when we go into a domestic violence shelter, and it doesn't even have to be a shelter, it could be transitional living, but anything that deals with domestic violence, we are really changing not only the life of the victim, usually a woman, but her children and her loved ones around her. So let's go into some of the statistics. The victims are usually women and children across all ethnic groups and economic classes. 3 women are killed per day by her husband and boyfriend. 1 in every, there is some kind of violence that happens every 10 seconds in the United States where a woman is assaulted or beaten. So the statistics are fairly staggering. So what is the need? The need is that shelter residents have huge money worries. They usually come with the clothes on their backs with their children. They may have little or no income and very few assets. And some may have low financial literacy, but I have found that domestic violence affects all economic classes. You could have someone who is a business owner, very economically savvy, but be in a domestic violence relationship. So be very careful. Don't make any assumptions, but also just know that there's a lot of need. So if you're wondering what's the next step, what we as financial planners, we can help with the financial planning part. We want to give the shelter residents a roadmap, provide a sense of hope that with the proper education, they can control their finances and be empowered. We want to also emphasize that kind of empowerment doesn't happen overnight. It takes a lot of time, but again, as I said earlier, when we help the mother, we're helping her children and the future generations and the people who love the victim. Creating a pro bono program. The first thing you need to do is, because there's 100 chapters across the United States, the strengths of each of the chapters are very, very different, and the weaknesses are very, very different. So you have to assess your own chapter's commitment. You need to find out how many volunteers are available to help you. And then the next step, the easiest thing I would say is to locate not only a shelter, a transitional living facility, but every time I approach a shelter or a living facility, they're extremely welcoming of our pro bono services. They're very much wanting us to come in to either educate the trainers or educate their the people that they're helping. The next step is to develop a teaching program. There are lots of programs that are available. You just need to make sure that as you're developing the program that you cater it specifically to your own shelter or transitional living facility or whatever that situation you're helping. Make sure that when you go into the shelter, you find out what they want, what they need. And they may not even know what they need in terms of financial services. So the goal is to go in there without any kind of preconceived notion that you're going to do a 20-week educational process when they only want to start with a one session, one time, let's try it out. So when you locate your shelter, go in, find out what they need, and then from there develop your teaching program. We're going to be talking about what programs are available later on. And then build and train your volunteer team. Collect names of people who will be participating. Find out how much time they're willing to give. I find it that if you can find someone who is willing to volunteer for 1 or 2 hours per year, you'll find a lot more volunteers. And then from there, you build on it. Schedule the event and you order the material. You want to give it at least a couple of months in advance. Confirm the event and then send out reminder volunteers. The last thing is recognize and share success stories. And you'll find that sometimes you'll hear years later some of the success stories. I found that 5 years later, I heard about one of the victims who actually became a financial planner and is working for Deutsche Bank, extremely successful as a portfolio manager. I found out years later, after we did the train the trainers several times for one of the shelters, that one of the counselors had debts that she was hiding from her husband because she was so embarrassed by the credit card debt that she didn't know what to do, and she came to us and sort of divulged her situation. We worked with the director of the shelter to get her back on track, and it was something that took, I want to say it took at least a couple of years where she felt that she had her finances under control. So some of those success stories will take a little bit of time, but as you continue to work, you'll find that there will be ways to recognize and share those success stories. It's not, sorry. Okay. Access and obtain chapter commitment. When I first started this program, I was the one committed person to get the program started. But the more I participated in this, and I got an understanding of the great need, I was able to find other people. And then I became the person who was coordinating the program. So I just want to emphasize, if you have one person who can dedicate themselves to one shelter and get the program started, you can find other volunteers who are willing to give 1 or 2 hours per year, and then as they get excited, you will find other volunteers. Suggest holding financial planning workshops at a domestic shelter to your board and pro bono committee. Offer to implement the program as part of the pro bono. I mean, those things are fairly common sense. Locating the domestic violence shelter. If you just go to the any kind of Google, Yahoo search engine, you'll find information on the domestic shelters that are close to your chapter. One of the things that I want to emphasize is make it easy on yourself. If you can find something within a 5 to 10 mile radius of your work or where most of your volunteers work, that would be a great way to make that easy for your volunteers. And then contact the shelter and offer to volunteer. As I said earlier, these facilities want our help, and they're excited to get our services for free. So you'd be surprised how easy it is. You can look up the National Domestic Violence Hotline. It's called thehotline.org. You can call up the National Domestic Violence Coalition and get some information. The other phone number is 211, and they will give you information about local governmental services wherever you are locally. Okay, so what happens after you contact the shelter is you're probably going to be invited to tour the facility. You'll be able to meet the staff to discuss what kind of financial planning, to discuss what financial planning is and what you can do for the shelter. You also want to know what their needs are. Ask them the length of stay they're going to be at your shelter or transitional living, because some of the places, I think the stay may be limited to 45 days unless there's a second phase. So find out how long the women are going to be in that shelter transitional living facility, and then take some of the FPA brochures and material to explain what financial planning is and what the pro bono policies are. And again, discuss the shelter needs and logistics. Developing a teaching program. 4 critical topics: understanding cash flow and budgeting, opening up a bank account, how to save money, building an emergency fund, managing credit and cleaning up credit records, then getting a job or education. The other thing you might consider doing is try to look for other professionals in the industry. For instance, if the shelter residents need help in opening up a bank account, you may consider contacting the local bank or credit union and have them come with you while you're giving them the presentation. And also the same thing with the cleaning up the credit and credit records. You can find a credit counseling agency who will be willing to give up of their time and their expertise. Useful books and manuals. Hope and Power for Your Personal Finances. That is by the National Coalition Against Domestic Violence. NEFI High School Financial Planning Program. That's a National Endowment for Financial Education. They have both a manual that you can give out for free. They also have a teacher's manual that is extremely extensive. I want to say the manual is about 2 inches thick. And I usually will order that a couple of months in advance of the workshop. The NEFI High School Financial Planning program, I've used that program not only with high schoolers, but I've used that at the local community colleges, and I've used that with rocket scientists. And the material is relevant no matter how old you are, from, I want to say, the freshmen in high school to rocket scientists, brilliant people. Some of the concepts that are in that financial planning program is totally relevant, and we continue to use that material. So just make sure that you order it in advance. It's all for free. You just have to let them know when and how you're going to use it and how many participants are going to be part of that. But I really, really like the teacher's manual. And then Money Smart is by FDIC.gov. As I said earlier, if you don't try to go on it alone, try to get help from the community. Try to have participation from the local bank, the city or county low-income housing specialists, credit counseling professionals who can volunteer and help you out. And then again, as your workshops continue to grow, try to get other partners or community professionals. When you're building and training a volunteer team, talk to your fellow members in the pro bono committee or other committee meetings. I really want to emphasize a few can do a lot. 6 planners can handle 12 monthly workshops, doing 2 each. I happen to be a procrastinator, and I always I have to play games with myself so that I do things in advance, but be sure you review your teaching materials in advance. And before the first workshop, discuss the presentation you're going to give, discuss what their expectation is, what the shelter expectation is of the financial planning workshop, and then make sure that you are flexible to cater to their needs. Remember, it's all about catering to what the particular shelter's needs are and being flexible to make sure that you're helping them. And then confirm what your expectations are. Schedule the events, prepare and order the material. I usually like to schedule the event at least 2 months in advance. I like to order the material at least 2 months in advance. Balance the needs of the residents along with the volunteers to determine your schedule. As I said earlier, residents stay about 30 days, possibly up to 45 days. So find out how long they stay in a shelter or the transitional living facility. And then determine how often you're going to have the meetings. Is it going to be once a month, once a quarter? How often are you going to do the train the trainers? And then, again, prepare and order the materials well in advance. When I do the workshop, I usually will go through the audience and ask each of the participants what their expectation is. And I've had workshops where it was a fairly financially savvy group of individuals, and then I've had workshops where none of them spoke English. and it wasn't just Spanish. It was some very interesting European language that I wasn't even sure what the language was. And so I've had interesting workshops where we were doing some of the presentations with hand gestures and kind of talking to them very basic financial concepts, and then with others where we were talking about 401k rollovers and how to do an asset allocation. So format your workshops based on the audience. And then after the workshop, I usually like to do a one-on-one consultation of 5 to 10 minutes where I'm talking to them individually. And again, be flexible depending on the resident's needs and what you're comfortable with. Confirm the event, remind the volunteers, confirm it with the shelter. An unusual thing happened to me, actually twice, where they had pest infestation in two of the shelters that I was teaching, and so the PowerPoint, the workshop got canceled last minute. So I would say confirm and reconfirm before you go to the shelter, because there's always something going on, and you want to make sure that you don't drive all the way to the shelter and find out it was canceled because of something that happened very suddenly. And then email the volunteers, and then remind the next person who is up next. And lastly, recognize and share your success stories. Talk to the volunteers after they conduct the workshops and thank them. Ask them how it went, what you can do to make it better. Ask your volunteers to share experiences at the pro bono committee meetings, and then inform the chapter and the shelter information that they will probably appreciate, and then report to the board via website and newsletters. That's pretty much it. I will tell you that the more you do this kind of volunteer work, although the rewards aren't financial, the spiritual and the mental and the psychological rewards are enormous. And when you start to hear the success stories and you find out the people you have blessed, the people you have changed, the people you have benefited, and the children that you have helped, you get the warm and fuzzies. It's just really an incredible, incredible experience. Thank you very much.
Andy,
Thank you so much, Andy.
That was great.
Thank you.
Andy, I was wondering.
Go ahead.
I was just a general question for Andy. You've done other pro bono with other populations. How do you think the people in domestic violence shelters, how psychologically different that you would have to adjust when you're dealing with them? You know, can you share a little bit of that?
Sure. Again, think of it as the general population, because, sad to say, as I said earlier, the statistics are really overwhelming. And what's surprising is that you could have a CEO of a fairly good-sized company be a victim of domestic violence. And that person may not go to a shelter because they have financial ability, but the women who come will be someone from very lower class, underprivileged, no access to financial assets, to someone who will be middle class. And so you have to be very sensitive to all of that. And I would suggest not making any kind of assumptions that they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Go in with compassion, ask questions about what their needs are, and go in kind of as an empty slate, because you're not going to know the individual you're helping and what their background is. When you find someone who has always had the husband take care of all of their finances, and maybe they weren't educated or exposed to financial services or anything that had to do with finance, that doesn't mean that they're not smart or they're not they don't have the ability, it's because they may never have been exposed because they had a controlling spouse or boyfriend. And so you always want to go in with the sense that they have the ability to learn. Some of the concepts might be brand new, but you're there to teach them and to expose these people. And ask questions. What is it that you want to benefit today? What is it? And sometimes they don't even know what they don't know.
Mhm.
And but just be sensitive and compassionate.
Andy, I have a question about background checks. With some of the shelters that you've worked with, did they put the presenters through any extra screening before they could come into the shelter?
Some of the, in the past it was a little bit more loosey-goosey, but I'm finding that a lot of the volunteer work, whether it's domestic violence or with students, or that they want us to be fingerprinted. So that's not unusual. And so a lot of the shelters will do a background check. Some of the shelters don't want men to go in, and other shelters welcome men coming in a non-threatening environment, teaching, being compassionate, caring, nurturing these women and the children in a non-threatening environment, giving other services, and then leaving. So I've had both, where some shelters say we don't feel that we want to have men coming in at this time, and then other shelters say we want to see wonderful examples of men coming in a very positive situation and helping the victims. So you have both, and again, you want to be sensitive to that.
Hey, Andy, looking at your presentation, this is Thomas from Little Rock, and it's almost, I think you did a great job in your presentation, but it's almost word for word what we're doing with our local homeless shelter, just from a presentation format and whatnot. I
think that great minds think alike.
Well, and I won't take a lot of this. The shelter has been doing this for years. We've just kind of gone in and helped standardize it a little bit, where we can kind of plug and play planners to deliver the content. So that's pretty much the extent of my role. But one challenge, and this is directly dealing with me, one of my families left the shelter and is theoretically on their own out in the general population. So they rented an apartment. They definitely still need my help, but what is your relationship like when your women leave the shelter with their children? Do you continue planning with them? Is there a different shift in engagement, or what are your thoughts around that?
I think it depends on you as a planner, how much you're willing to help them. I had a woman who had a very small, tiny little 401k, and I helped her roll it over. And I kept the relationship for 10 years, for a very, very long, long time. She finally got engaged and was getting married, and she actually invited me to her engagement party. And I went, and it was a very small, intimate engagement party where it was all family and few of her very close friends. And her sister asked me, because I was the only Asian in this very Hispanic kind of environment. So I stood out, and she says, "Who are you? Where do you come from?" And she looked at me, and I could see the fear on her eyes. I said, "I'm her financial planner," and because she didn't want anyone to know her situation or her history in the past, so I needed to be sensitive to that. And so I'm her financial planner, and her sister says, "My sister has money?" And I said, it doesn't, you can have a financial planner help you, even if you don't have a lot of money. And I'm glad to be helping your sister, no matter how much she's got. And I could I can see the stress come out of her. So it's totally up to the chapter, what their ground rules are and how they want to help. But I think the one thing we want to emphasize is that we're not doing this because we're going to get paid this huge, enormous amount of money to do this. We're doing it because it's a public service.
Just as a follow-up for Thomas, I think that's something that you can spell out when you do an MOU, the Memorandum of Understanding with the organization, and also what the limits of the letter of engagement, what you decide that's going to be. So you can do that in advance.
Yeah.
And I think that one of the things you want to be very careful is that if they seek you out after the fact, and you know, how are you going to participate in that too? I think that's the other thing you need to be concerned about.
Cool.
Versus you don't ever go in with business cards, because that's not going to be appropriate at all.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Thank you.
Andy?
Yeah.
I have a question. A lot of the work that we do on the pro bono side is obviously, and I appreciate the fact that these come from all different economic backgrounds. But when you're dealing particularly with people in a crisis situation like this, how much do you need to know, or are you asked about public assistance programs for these folks? I mean, before you even get to the budgeting stage, presumably they're in a crisis situation. Does the shelter itself have other professionals that you can count on, or do you have to become an expert in, you know, Medicaid and children's health care and things like that? Or do you just preclude that from what you do?
Yeah, no, I would say that I am not an expert on Medicaid. I am not an expert on Medi-Cal. Because that is not my clientele. But, and I would not even say that I'm an expert on budgeting and those kind of things, but we're experts enough. If we're financial planners, we know enough, even though our general clientele might not be this audience, we as financial planners know enough to help them. And if we don't have the expertise, then we fall back onto the shelter or the domestic violence facility and ask them to be the expertise. Don't try to be something you're not, is what I would say, because I know that that's not something that I am.
And do you make that clear then when you go in and talk to the shelter and say, you know, I really can't, I don't know anything about Section 8 housing or something like that?
No, yeah, right. No, they would know about that.
All right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Generally,
So
they're the experts in all those areas.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, and if you want to delve into that and learn about it, I would find out from them where and how to do that. It was not something that I wanted to spend my time in. I mean, actually early on I tried, but it wasn't, and it's, again, you have to keep up with it, and I honestly did not have the time to do that.
Right. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. I wanted to sort of stick to my own expertise.
Right. Of course. Okay. Thanks.
Andy, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
This is Judy C. I just want to let you know I jumped on the call.
Yes, we're pretty much done with the presentation, and we're taking questions at this time. Judy, if you want to share maybe for 5 minutes what you've done. Judy, I want to introduce Judy. She is actually right now presenting at a domestic violence facility, and she has a 12-week program. Is that correct, Judy?
That's correct. It is the same program as has been being done in New York, along with, in coordination with the working in support of education nonprofit that does a financial literacy certification. So we're doing 12 weeks of education and then a certificate at the end. And it's funded by a grant from Allstate, of which Working in Support of Education is doing the grant. And FPA and me as coordinator, we're providing the volunteers to teach all the modules. So we just started with our third class, our third 12-week class last night, and we had 18 ladies there, and it's really wonderful program, and I really appreciate it, and I'm excited. So if anybody has any questions, I jumped down to college to be a resource.
Thank you so much, Judy.
My pleasure.
Judy, what program is this, and where can you get it?
Great question. So I'm happy to go offline and tell you in more detail. I can be reached at judydwy@bluesummitwealth.com. But this program was first started in New York with the New York chapter of FPA in coordination with this other nonprofit called Working in Support of Education. They do financial literacy program in these schools, and they help design this specifically for victims of domestic violence. So I took it and rolled it out in San Diego in 2012. And so I can put you in touch with David Anderson at WISE. I can forward you, all the information that I have and any stuff that I've added to the program as well.
Judy, did you say Judy at Blue Summit, BLUESUMMIT wealth.com?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Andy, perhaps you can write her contact information on the chat space so everybody has it correctly and a phone number?
Sure, I will do that.
Thank you.
Actually, Judy, you can do that for yourself.
I don't know that I'm on your chat space. I'm sorry.
I'll put it in.
Okay.
I didn't realize you were in front of a screen, Judy. Sorry.
Okay. Noreen, you have the information then.
Yes, I do. I'll put it in.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm happy to help anybody get a program like this started or anything like it. I'm just really excited about what we've been doing. Our last graduation, we had 14 girls graduate and get certified, and we had the director from the nonprofit fly all the way to San Diego from New York, and the funder from Allstate who pays for the child care and all the food we feed the women every week. They get pizza and salad, and all the kids get child care and they get fed. And so the guy from Allstate that writes the checks for it, he came down, and it's been really, really well received.
Has anyone ever done this type of work in a prison? The reason I ask is I have a friend whose niece is incarcerated right now, and we've been to visit, and here they have this time. A lot of these people are from domestic violence situations, actually, and they're just kind of in the place that they are because of financial illiteracy. And while they're there, they're not allowed to, they don't get much training at all. Here they would have time to learn. I can't even mail books to her. They don't allow you to mail any literature at all. Has anyone ever tried this in a penal institution?
I have not, but I would venture to say that there are people who have within the membership of the FPA. So someone, if they call out and say, have you done this, there probably will be people who will come out and say, yes, I've done this for years.
Now there was, I recall there was a chapter working with the male population in prison, but I don't remember the chapter. But that's a question that could be posed on the new community that we've set up, Pro Bono 360. And you will get an answer there on that.
This is Amanda in Pittsburgh. We don't have anything here in Pittsburgh with our chapter with the local prison facilities, but I do know that I participated with a group through CORO, Center for Civic Leadership, which is a national organization, back in 2009, and it was a Women in Leadership program. And part of our, one of the community programs that we did was we partnered with the local prison. They had, as their inmates were transitioning out, specifically the females, they had a transition program, and we worked with them to develop a train-the-trainer program on financial literacy. I would imagine most prisons would have something similar.
Could you tell me the name of the organization again that you said you were involved with?
CORO, for Center for Civic Leadership. It's a national organization. I don't know if they have one in your area, but you can go to there. It's a national nonprofit to see if there's a chapter in your area.
Center for Civic Leadership?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
This is Anthea in the New York chapter. We did something, or are doing something similar, helping mostly men coming out of prison through other agencies. For example, we do a financial literacy workshop series for Career Gear. A number of the people who work with Career Gear had been incarcerated. Another agency we work with is Project Renewal, which deals with the formerly homeless. Many of the formerly homeless also have been released from prison, and we do financial literacy programs with them as well. So that's another way to work with that population. If it's difficult getting into the prison, is to work with the agencies that help through those transition periods.
And the agencies that help with transition, what was the agency you were referencing?
Career Gear, they're national. They help men sort of turn their lives around, give them a suit, give them a lot of training, help them with job skills, and we come in and we help them with financial literacy.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I just want to emphasize that there's lots of opportunities, and you'd be surprised when you go out and you're letting them know that you want to give of your services as a chapter, as an organization, and it's truly without any kind of expectations in return, no financial remuneration. They're so thrilled to get our assistance. It's surprisingly a lot easier than people think. It's just making sure that you prepare your chapter for the flood of help and meeting those needs.
Well, Andy, thank you so much for this wonderful presentation and the Q&A that we've had. I think now we're going to switch to Noreen, who will give us a tour of the new website, since there has been some difficulty for people to find what they're looking for. Is that right, Noreen? Noreen?
Okay, I'm back. Sorry, I was muted. Essentially, I just want to point
Okay.
We're back up here. If I can raise my screen. Can you all see my screen? Let's see. Are you seeing one FPA?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
With the new rollout, I just want to point out a few things. On the far right of your screen, there is the Connect Communities. So you can go there and sign up for Pro Bono 360. Okay, so that's how you get to Connect. The other question that's commonly asked...
And mentoring.
And mentoring. And post your questions about Pro Bono, and everyone respond there.
Right.
The other thing is people can't have a hard time finding the presentations. They are, I'll just click to them quickly. It's, you got to go to, and I will send out some information for this as well, but you got to click on chapters, and then you have to come down to, I got to move something out of my way, chapter officer resources. And then you've got to log in, which I wasn't, sorry. Oh, good, I remembered my login. Chapter officer resources, and I will send you details, and you have to scroll down. And you have Pro Bonos here too. Pro Bono directors down here on the bottom. So you can get to Pro Bono stuff here, but if you're looking for the presentations, they're under Community Service Directors, and you scroll down, and there they all are, okay? So that's where they are. And if I go back, and let's see if the link is working. If you go to Pro Bono, well, I'm going to go to the home page. You can hit Pro Bono here, and it's going to redirect you to the foundation site. And then you can hit the new FPA pages right here, okay? You can, if you don't remember the password, you can request it. It's the same as last year, FPA Pro Bono 2013. And we have all the pre-sources and stuff by topic, okay? And you can jump around the page. The other thing is if you're at the main page, Pro Bono is under advocacy too. You see it there? So you can find it to a couple of different places. So I just wanted to review that, and I will be sending out a summary of the call, the PowerPoint from Andy, and I will also try to put this this meeting audio video online so those that missed the call can access it.
Thank you, Noreen. Perhaps we can include the reference to the MOU and the LOE on the summary there that you'll be sending out, so it'd be easy for them to find it.
Okay, I will. I will definitely. And I can try to go to it, but it's under those chapter tools.
Okay. Are there any other questions? So, Dick, are you still on the call?
I have a question. Did any of you who are doing these types of programs in the, either with the prisons or the domestic violence shelters, did you also seek out to get some publicity about this for both the chapter and the shelter?
I did actually, and I was sought out. So there was a 2-page article in Money Magazine, and it was sponsored by ING. And then I think we got a TV segment by the local news channel, public service channel. And so I actually got a lot of publicity for the Financial Planning Association for the work that we did. And I think it's great publicity for the shelter and also for the chapter, so I would definitely seek it out.
But I would also be very careful because of the specific situation these women are in.
No, but the Omega, the shelter knows.
Right.
So when the shelter is doing the photography or being photographed by a cameraman, they will not have anyone there that their faces or that they can't be, they're somehow
Recognized, right.
Yeah.
I just meant to say that rather than, the chapter it has to be coordinated very carefully with the organization.
Absolutely. But most of the time, I would say that the chapter is very careful who they present to the public, and it's usually, it's definitely not a consumer or someone who's living or participating. It's usually a counselor or someone way after the fact, maybe a success story where they're not threatened any longer. So they're very careful, and yes, it's something that is that the chapter very much does everything to protect the people that they need to protect.
The article that was sponsored by ING, so did ING basically buy the space in Money Magazine, and then they did an article about the program that we're doing?
Yes.
So that was something that you would talk to your wholesalers about, or there's a chapter about coming up with the money for that?
It really depends on how you want to present it. So I just want to emphasize that there are opportunities available. Make sure that you coordinate with your chapter board first on how that's going to look like, and then go forward with it with the different media possibilities.
Right.
Because it's not just domestic violence shelter, but whatever work we do within the community, that we want to make sure that we get media coverage.
Right, understood. I just wouldn't have ever thought about contacting a wholesaler to sponsor pages in a national publication. I think that's great. I wouldn't have, so I'm curious about that specifically. If, so you approached your wholesaler?
No, I actually was approached.
Okay. Very
yeah.
nice.
Yeah, I was approached. And, but I also, I was also the PR person. I've pretty much have done a lot of the board positions in the long track record that I've had with the Financial Planning Association and with the predecessor organization. And so I try to create synergy with the work that we do.
Right.
So if we can get coverage for the chapter and get media coverage, I work towards that. So I try really hard to spread it around and make sure that other people know the kind of work we're doing.
Thank you.
Noreen, would you like to reference the next quarterly call?
I sure will. We are so grateful, Andy. That was really great. Everyone's questions and participation were really great. I thought it was very informative. And I know that many of you are working with military populations. So our next call is going to be Friday, April 25th. And we're going to have working with military populations. So we'll be presenting on all of those unique aspects of working with military.
Thank you, everyone, for coming on the call. I'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Andy. It was great.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Take care.
Thanks, Andy.